Good evening. The April 2024 meeting of the Alamance County Planning Board will come to order. I've got the roll up here. Have you got it down there also?
Yes, sir.
All right.
We have a quorum to conduct business.
Okay. Well, all right then. So has everybody had a chance to read the minutes from the last meeting? Anybody got any questions with them?
I have thing on the motion that was made for the 6 foot bid. They've got it down as earnings.
Mhm.
That motion, I think I was the one that made that motion. Oh,
Okay. Well, you want to change it? You want me to change it?
Ian, do you recall?
Not specifically, we'll look back through the report and verify that. Yeah.
All right. Anything else? We get a motion, we can do something with it.
So we make a motion with that potential change, or how does that work?
Exactly.
Let's make a motion that they'll clarify it.
Okay, I'll make that motion then.
Okay, got a motion, need a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second to clarify who actually made that motion or both of them. All in favor, aye. Opposed? Okay. So we got that out of the way. All right, public comments. Before we start this, now, we've got 3 minutes. We generally don't try to be real locked in. If somebody's got something that we need to hear, we need to hear it. We generally don't want to hear the same thing 50 times. So there's where we are with that. Now, last month, some of you was here. I acknowledged a person in the meeting and allowed them to speak. I won't do that again. I also said in that last meeting, you know, when I'm wrong, I can learn. So I did. So moving forward, we're going to hear the public comments. If you got something you want us to hear, we want to hear it. If you got something you think you want us to hear, we want to hear it. But when we get through hearing, then that's when the board needs to do its work. So moving forward, once we get through the public comments, then I'm gonna have to ask you to not interrupt. If that don't work, well, I'd ask you to leave. So has anybody got any questions about that? Those of you that was here understand what we're talking about. Okay, public comments. Mr. Thronberg.
Good evening. So my name is Jeff Thronberg. I'm the local custom home builder, currently serving as president for the Alamance County Home Builders Association. Presentation about minimum lot sizes was brought before this board on June 9th, 2022. Mr. Cheek proposed a 5-acre lot minimum for subdivision of 15 lots or more. And surprisingly, it is on the mission in a later meeting simply because it's a personal issue for him. Currently, the minimum is 30,000 square feet. In July 2023, a public input session was held. The room was packed and nearly a dozen speakers shared concerns. 1, builders and developers about the impact on housing. 2, multi-generational landowners about the impact on land values. And 3, citizens frustrated about the lack of public knowledge and engagement. Last month, almost 2 years later, the recommendation was made to require minimum lot size of 2 acres, allow cluster subdivisions and a 50-foot buffer with a goal to safeguard agricultural operations, reduce environmental impacts on water resources, and allow for affordable housing. Several speakers and guests continue to echo many of the same concerns that do not align with these goals. Most compelling was Wilson Mize with DHHS, who has run the state's private and well program since 2008, who noted rare cross-contamination with wells and septic systems, no concern with smaller lot sizes and minimal impact on the water table. In fact, last year, our own Rob Snow noted he has not seen major or long-lasting difficulties with wells or well failures. Most appreciated were board members Lee Isley and Stephen Dawson, who questioned affordable housing or lack thereof in the past 6 months. 1,044 residential homes sold in Alamance County. The median price for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house was $325,000. Most surprised was board member Henry Hines, who clearly was out of touch with property values. And in the past 6 months, 59 land parcels sold in Alamance County, the medium size 2.12 acres, and the median price was $72,000. I guess the most disappointing in this discussion spanned almost 2 years through the necessity to increase the minimum lot size has not been demonstrated. Shouldn't a recommendation to county leaders impacting our citizens be necessary for the best interest of many and directly reflect the feedback you have received? So my understanding, I guess, is planning board members, you are appointed by the commissioners or elected officials. Not really sure how familiar you are with the home builders on a local or state level. We support local politicians on a nonpartisan basis. And to give a little example, last year, Governor Cooper's administration tried to get an energy efficiency bill passed that was going to increase the cost of an average home by $20,000. By doubling the lot sizes and the lot costs, that's going to double that. So we as local home builders and at state level as well are willing to do whatever we have to do to bring to attention to whoever necessary to get a reasonable lot size, acre, whatever, so we can have more affordable housing. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper?
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, something that's gaining traction around the country, and I think probably it's an overreaction. But let's just suppose for a few moments that the planning board has recommended to the county commissioners changing to a 2-acre minimum lot size. And at the public hearing, a citizen comes in and says, from the Lexington Herald Leader, just blow it all up. Kentucky House Bill 102 would kill most zoning and planning rules for local government. So more affordable housing could be built everywhere. End quote. He continues, if such changes as you are seeking didn't work in Kentucky, Arizona, or Colorado, what are the facts to show that they're likely to work here? What areas of the country have similar rules in place, such as you propose, that have been successful? Now, personally, like this gentleman, I want a 1-acre lot size. But wondering what could be built everywhere meant in the Kentucky bill, I needed to find a comment from someone close to the Kentucky situation. Again, from the Lexington Herald Leader, in an article by Linda Blackford, quote, House Bill 102 would get rid of rules that prevent people from putting tiny houses and accessory dwelling units in their backyard. Erase parking minimums, allow duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes in single-family home neighborhoods, and limit fees and hearings required on new construction. And that's just the start. End quote. I just want the board to be careful and not do something that's going to trigger such a reaction somewhere down the road for Alamance County. You know what I'm saying? I'll be happy with the status quo rather than some goofy mess like they're doing out there. Thank you.
Thank you. and Mr. Chandler.
I'd like to thank the board for allowing me to speak just for a few moments this evening. I watched this board wrestle with the topic of minimum lot sizes for over a year now. There have been many good presentations of data and people expressing their views just as they have here tonight. What troubled me last month, other than the rude behavior of some present, is most speakers made no mention of what may be good for the county. Most, not all, the comments were about what is financially best for them. They have every right to speak and express their views. But I wager none of the people that spoke here last month live on a 30,000 square foot lot with well and septic tank. They probably don't want to. It's my understanding this board is to serve the citizens of Alamance County and not specific industries. This issue concerns probably 50 to 60,000 people in this county. It's a big deal. On March 2023, the proposal was made by a member of this board to increase lot size to 65,000 square feet, which is approximately 1.5 acres. I witnessed suggestions over the year for 1 acre, possibly 2 acres, several people with different opinions. I've heard very convincing arguments that a 30,000 square foot lot is not adequate for septic and well in the long term. I've heard enough to where I have drawn that conclusion myself. I'm aligned with that statement. So I began to try to visualize what a 30,000 square foot lot would look like. I couldn't really come up with anything exact. But what I did do is there's a community development taking place near my home, northern Alamance County. There's both sides of the road are being developed. This particular side is, I've looked at the GPS, there's 14 lots. Most of them, 86% of them are 1 acre. Duplicate is happening on the opposite side of the road. I couldn't stand in the road to get a good picture because it's too dangerous. So I had to get off to the side. So the pictures are not perfect. Now, the houses are very close to the road. This is not a subdevelopment. This is Highway 62, 70 miles an hour sometimes. It's a racetrack in the morning when people are trying to go to work. All right. I'm assuming the houses are close to the road. The lots are narrow and deep, houses close to the road, probably because they don't have the good luck in approving septic tanks, because the farm right next door to it was not approved for septic tanks years ago, but somebody in Raleigh got involved and got it passed. And I understand somebody in Raleigh got involved in this development as well. I don't know how that works. I just want to ask the committee, is this what you want Alamance County to look like? Highway 62, 49, 87, and other prominent roads. Mr. Isley brought up a really good point last month about his concern of affordability, and I respect that. I saw this week on the National Desk News that a young family must make $110,000 to afford a small and medium-sized home. This same report revealed the average household income of $97,000, which doesn't match. It doesn't go together. That can't be considered the law of the land, as we don't know the parameters of the survey. However, it indicates that concern is nationwide. It's just not Alamance County. Leaving minimum lot sizes at 30,000 square feet probably won't resolve this concern. I am in favor of larger minimum lot sizes for properties that require well and septic, which are positioned outside of the more restrictive and established watershed regulations. It is best for the homeowner's safety in regard to water quality and will enhance the overall experience of our county. I'd be in favor of an acre, 50,000, 60,000, whatever the case, whatever this board wants to decide to do. Plus possibly an increase in minimum road frontage and setback requirements, potentially. I encourage this board to move forward and make a recommendation to the county commissioners as soon as you can. I don't know what more can be accomplished by continuing the feedback over and over again, especially at this level of government. I want to sincerely, I'm looking at you, I want to sincerely thank this board for the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. So this concludes our public comments. Has anybody else got anything they want to say while we've got public comments open? Okay. Public comments are closed. Now on our agenda, we've got Article 3 on the UDO. Then we've got the conclusion of the presentation we was gonna make last week, and then we move into Article 4. Now, I think for expediency, we need to look at all the UDO stuff. So I want to amend the agenda and do Article 3, Article 4, and then lot size subcommittee report.
Go with the amended agenda.
So we got a motion and a second to amend the agenda. All in favor, aye? Opposed? Okay. Mr. Planning Director. I'll
Thank you,
let
Mr. Chairman.
Talk about number 3.
Well, after we, went through everything that we did with Article 2 at the last meeting, I promised you I would not bring you 12 additional pages of text for Article 3. So, the only additional amendment on Article 3 after your last meeting, under section 3.1.1 for specifications for plans and plats. Under plats, item B, Mr. Dodson had pointed out that the proper reference or notation there would be 1 inch equals 400 feet. And we made that change. There are no additional changes to Article 3. And again, too, just to make sure we're all looking at the same thing. So the format is underlined text, it would be new text, strike through would be gotten rid of. You'll see a lot in here, a uniformity of the term NC General Statute, NCGEN.STAT, just to make that uniform. You'll see that a lot in here as well. But again, that's all I've got for Article 3.
Anybody got any questions with that? Any comments? Let's go to 4.
All right, Article 4, we've got a little bit more here, so I'll just go through these section by section. You are certainly welcome to stop me at any point if you'd like, or we can have a deeper discussion and answer questions after the fact. We'll just go through it as we can here. So on the front page there under enforcement procedures, this clarifies that the purpose of this section is to establish for the enforcement of the provisions of the UDO. And just for the sake of uniformity, capitalizes Historic Property Commission and the term ordinance, which is more uniform throughout the rest of the document. Section 4.2.1 clarifies that complaints may be taken in electronic form. That's actually the most common way that we receive complaints, and adds a clause about obtaining photographic or videographic evidence of violations. Section 4.2.2 changes the term holder of the development approval to responsible party, since the person violating the ordinance may not always be involved in a pending development. This also requires that a photo or video be made of a notice when it is posted on the property. Section 4.3 under remedies, this would be amended to allow for multiple options when enforcing the ordinance. This would keep the existing option of a stop work order, but it would also add the denial of permits, conditioning permits for corrective action, and revoking permits. Section 4.3.1 under stop work orders. These changes here are just minor clarification on the language of stop work orders. Section 4.3.2, this change adds a section for the denial of permits, applications, or certificates when an existing unresolved violation exists on the same property for which a new permit is being sought. Section 4.3.3, this would add a section allowing for the conditioning of permit approval upon the remedy of an existing violation. Section 4.3.4 would add a section allowing the planning department to revoke permits if there is a substantial departure from the approved plans or other failure to comply with the regulation or state laws. Section 4.4 divides up civil penalties and criminal penalties into numbered sections, and this is really just in terms, really just formatting to be more consistent with the rest of the document. And then section 4.5 clarifies that planning staff, in addition to the planning director, may also enforce notices for chronic violators. That's all I've got about Article 4. Just a whole lot of code enforcement. Everybody's favorite.
So, quick question. One of the things that we dealt with, last year for the last, was a similar situation when it was a violation of, I guess they was operating the rock quarry when they didn't have authorization by the planning director, and there was questions about, well, who goes and enforces that? So it seemed like I read over this earlier. That was the planning director or your designee would enforce it first with, in writing and then subsequent issues. But where I never got clarification on is, so what if they ignore your request, and what happens? How does it, who makes the decision to go to the next level and start the criminal proceedings? And when you got a big company, I mean, $500 is dropping a hat. So that was something that I was looking to see if there was any additional language surrounding how do we enforce it. And I think the answer we got last time from the last director was the sheriff's office.
So the issue in play related to that was a violation or an alleged violation of the noise ordinance. Without getting too far into the weeds on that issue, I'm not sure that there was necessarily a violation of the ordinance as written. Many folks claimed that there was. I don't know that there was ever substantiated that there was a violation. The noise ordinance doesn't quite read in the way people think it does in many instances. And so I had to do some clarifying conversation with folks about that. But the end result was that there was never the ability for a charge to be made. I'm not sure that our UDO necessarily covers operations of heavy industry, at least not that heavy industry. And so I'm not sure the planning director had any real involvement with that at all.
See, I think that was the issue, because we discovered, correct me if I'm wrong, those that was on the board last few years, that they never got the permit to operate. I may not be calling it correct, operations permit, but the residents were saying they were operating. They send trucks over down the road, in and out. And so who defined what operating meant? That was still kind of up in the air. And so it kind of never went anywhere, to my understanding, unless something happened. I didn't.
Well, the heavy industrial development ordinance, the HIDO, doesn't necessarily squarely apply to the quarry because, without again going into too much of the history, it wasn't brought under that at the time that it was put there. In fact, part of the HIDO that we have now is in response to that quarry having been put in place.
Right.
So they had an operations permit from the state that doesn't bar them from operating at any time, day, night, weekend, holiday, Easter, Christmas. There was an arrangement at one point for them not to operate at certain periods of time, but that was never something that was enforceable. And folks took exception to them operating late in the evening hours. And we weren't convinced, based on what we observed at the time, that there was a clear violation of the ordinance as it read at the time, based on the operations they were performing. Corporations are citizens as well. And to the extent that they operate within the parameters that are set on them, we can't necessarily say that those corporate citizens have less rights than residential homeowners. And that was part of the problem.
Yeah, I think you cleared it up actually with the state having given them the operating permit. That kind of trumps what we would do in theory.
Well, and that's what they were put in business under the old HIDO. And the rules that they operate under were those, that it's like they're grandfathered through that. The new rules don't really apply to them.
But I think what Andy's trying to say is the same way I understood it. If you build a house, you gotta have a certificate of occupancy before you can live in that house. People were saying they were living in their house before they got their their permits to operate as a quarry. I think what you're trying to say is the way I understood what they were saying when that was back then.
Right, and it sounds like they had their permit from the state to operate. whether we gave them one or not. So I think that's where the confusion lied. We were under the impression that the planning director had not issued a permit to operate. But it sounds like the state did, so it didn't matter if we did or not. And so I was just kind of curious from an enforcement perspective, if there's any violations, do we really have the language spelled out that these violations can be addressed? And if so, I guess how? And it sounds like, looking at the new language there, revoking permits and so forth, that sounds like the mitigation efforts that we didn't have in the last one.
Yeah, so just in terms of kind of how we operate right now, I think you're exactly right, that the current enforcement authority and procedures that we have are lacking a little bit, and that's one of the reasons I want to add this flexibility in there, because situations can be different, right? Sometimes there's a clear violation of the ordinance, sometimes they're working towards completion and there's just one element that's off, and that's where the conditioning of a permit may be applicable, where you say, okay, if you correct this one error, then we'll go ahead and we'll move towards the final permit in that situation. In terms of the actual enforcement, so ultimately it's the enforcement of this ordinance comes back to the planning department, the planning director, namely, or their designee. Right. And so without a doubt, what the law is that it's our responsibility to enforce. What it's my job to do and our department's job to do is have a clear job description that gives that responsibility to one or more persons. So we're actually hiring right now, if you know of anybody. We're a 4-person department, and right now we're down to 3. And what I'm envisioning with the new person that comes on board is to take the lead on code enforcement. Another aspect of this I think is important to mention is fairly recently the General Assembly basically said, if you're going to assess penalties and fines that are violations of zoning or land development regulations, they have to be assessed as civil penalties. And so thankfully, that's already in here. If you look under 4.4, the civil penalty procedure is already there, and the amount allocated per violation is up to $500 per instance. And every day of continued violation could be an additional penalty. So a week's, 5 days worth of penalties, you're talking $2,500 hypothetically. In my job prior to this, we had a sliding scale, $50 for the first, 100 for the next, 200 for the next, 300 for the next, and it capped at 300, but you could continue to do 300 for every continued violation. So every place is a little bit different. It's important to have the job description and clear goals about who does code enforcement. It's important to specify that there's civil penalties to keep that in line with the general statutes. And I think too, it's important to have flexibility in enforcement procedures because every situation could be unique.
And Matthew, as a tag on to that, the General Assembly actually in 2022 in a similar effort made it permissible to criminalize certain ordinance violations, but only if the ordinance itself is expressly adopted as a criminal offense after 2 readings by the board. I'm not sure that's ever happened here. We don't pursue criminal enforcement as to our ordinances in this section that I'm aware of on a routine basis. But if we were to want to criminalize certain elements of this, we probably need to go back and specifically specify the section that is a criminal offense. I don't think it's any longer permissible to put in one blanket statement that any violation is a criminal offense. Wouldn't pass muster if we were to charge it. So a lot of places have seen fit to go through and identify certain issues that are in fact criminal offenses. We've done that with some other outside the UDO. If we want to do that here, I think we probably need to undertake a separate effort to identify which things might qualify and target those areas.
Interesting. Good questions.
Just out of curiosity, Anthony is looking at a hypothetical situation. In our last meeting, we looked at the width of the clearway. And that we determined to be 60 foot. And I'm not picking on them, I'm just using that because it was recent. and you go out and you've had a complaint that hasn't been maintained over the years and you can't, you know. You're saying the general statutes has a mechanism. Because at that point, you would have people living in those theoretically. And the work is complete, and they haven't maintained it, and you fine them $500 a day. And it rolls and rolls, and they're, you know, they don't. What is the capability to enforce? I know, I understand civil penalties, but eventually you would have to take them to court.
Well, there's a couple of different remedies. There's what I call the old fashioned way, which is where we litigate and we pursue a judgment, and then the judgment's assessed. We try to get a lien on the properties involved and then enforce the lien obligation. And then there's the less traditional method, which is to use what's called the state's clearinghouse, which is basically a repository of unpaid fines the state has. And they will look at your tax refunds, your lottery winnings, unclaimed money that you might have available. And the state has a program that will actually assess the penalties against those before they're returned to you. It's not quite as effective in some ways, but it takes a lot less work on behalf of staff to go after it. It's not an understatement to say that we are not staffed to pursue these. We're just not. Plaintiff side litigation for us is not always a priority because of the amount of defense work that we do, but we do have remedies at our disposal.
So I guess to the end of what you said before, are there some of the codes and the rules in our UDO that need to have criminal? Because I could see a criminal might have a little bit more teeth to it.
Sure.
Because if it's a situation, and maybe the Clearway is not a good example of that, but if it's something that is a hazard and hazards for others, and you're not being able to motivate people by civil, are there some that need to have?
There might be some that do. There are limitations as to which ones we can criminalize at this point, and certain ones that we always cannot. The legislature in 2022 decided that there was not a desire on the part of the legislature to allow cities and counties to criminalize certain things. So we can do it in some. Now, I will say also that it's a class 3 misdemeanor. So there's no possible penalty of incarceration or a violation unless you've got prior points under structured sentencing. So it's not much of a potential penalty, but it does exist. The other thing also is if the person shows up in court and says, well, I've evaded the issue, or I haven't done the same thing within 30 days, the court is bound to dismiss the underlying charge. So for lack of a better way of putting it, State Bill 300 in 2022 pretty much gutted our ability to criminalize county ordinances. I mean, it's possible, but there's not a lot of weight to those criminal charges at this point.
I mean, the goal would be compliance, not necessarily to.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah, but even if we had to make charges, it's not a substantial system for enforcement that way either. And that wasn't a county choice, that was one that was handed to us.
Is there any provisions in like what she's talking about where there's a constant violation of the ordinance of keeping the 30-foot clearway in space, shutting down an operation because they have not been warned and have not tried keeping to the ordinance of the clearway? You know, like we're using that as an example of the clearway. Is there a possibility that could be? Is that in our ordinance now that they could actually lose their permit or be shut down?
Well, we could, it doesn't necessarily relate to the permit. We could pursue what's called injunctive relief to get a temporary restraining order against the parties who are in violation of the ordinance and in violation of what's required. That requires us to file suit and get a court to decide that the issue requires that type of immediate action. That's not always something we're able to get courts to decide in our favor. I'll just tell you that we have a couple of these pieces of litigation pending right now, and we have found that it's difficult to get courts to take swift action against folks who are in violation of our planning and development ordinances. Just because there's a lot of things that judges are used to seeing that are substantial violations of law. And when these things are produced in court, they're not always seen as being weighty matters. So it is possible, but in practicality, sometimes it's very difficult to get that type of relief. Not trying to be the doomsdayer tonight, guys, but I'm just trying to give you the lay of the land as it is.
It's good to know
day-to-day.
these things. Yeah. And my experience in the past, a lot of times if somebody receives a letter and says, if you don't fix X, Y, and Z, you're gonna be fined $500.
Yeah.
They do what they can to bring it in line. It's certainly not the case every time. And a lot of people too don't know that they're violating the rule.
Right.
You know, we hear relatively often, oh, well, I thought Alamance County doesn't have any zoning, so we could just kind of do whatever we want, kind of thing. And I think just out of sheer ignorance, that's their understanding.
Yeah, we have actually taken the show on the road here recently and gone to some of these places with chronic violators and spoken with them in person. I'm not going to say that we have a great success rate that way, but we've had a few people that have swiftly complied with what we've asked based on the fact that we stood at the door and had a conversation with them. So we're trying to do things a little bit differently to avoid litigation as necessary, if possible, rather. But then also just tell them, hey, listen, we're on to you. Here's 30 days. We need to see some action. And a lot of people really do get action that way.
Anybody else?
So continue to look at it. If there's anything else we need to address in the next meeting, we can.
All right. Well, in that case, we'll finish the presentation that we didn't get all the way through last month. You want to pick up on that? You want Vaughn to do it?
Well, we got through my whole presentation. And again, I'll apologize for not, closely counting the number of lots on a couple of those slides. There's a little bit of egg on my face there. The point there was just, if it was a 1.5 acre proposal. So, I don't really have anything more to add on it. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that the board might have about amending the ordinance or how some of the proposals might play out, you know, timelines for possible adoption or any of those kind of technical things. I'm more than happy to answer those questions.
Does anybody on the board got any questions with where we are? Is any comments? Anything y'all want to talk about?
This what the subcommittee is presenting, or y'all still working on?
No, that's just the same from the last meeting, the goal and the recommendations that the subcommittee presented in March.
So I guess, where are we here now then? We've seen the presentation, you know, where are we at as far as a board with how and when we make a decision to potentially move forward?
Well, what I would like to do is to get a consensus from the group that we can have Matthew and the staff go ahead and start putting words on paper so that we've got a consistency statement. Here's what we want to do. Here's why. And get, Mr. Stevens to go through and make sure everything is legal, and we'll pass muster in court if it needs to, and go from there.
Okay.
So that's where I am. You on kind of on the same page?
Well, I guess at this point, it seems to me we've got some different ideas about some things. I've been enlightened a little bit since, you know, we've begun this process, and what I think's real and what's imagined and what might work. So I think for us is we need to kind of, you know, boil it down to what do you want that number to be?
Mhm.
And where can you live with it and where can you not live with it? We've heard a lot of talk about, what it is, where it ought to be, what people would be willing to accept. So it's somewhere in the middle of all that. We've heard about affordability. We've heard about, I don't know that we can, based on what Mr. Thronberg said, and we had a builder here last month talking about the prices of lots and the prices of houses. And I have a daughter and a son-in-law looking to try to buy and build. And so, it's just, there ain't no affordability hardly anymore. It's just no matter what that number is. It does get worse. The bigger the piece of property is, the worse it looks. On the other side of that is, what do you want the county to look like? We're not going, I think Mr. Morgan put it best one time, it's coming. You're not going to stop it. My thinking is, what do you want it to look like?
Mhm.
We've beat this thing down the road, as they say. We've kicked this can till there ain't much of a can left. So I'm at a point where either let's do something or let's just go home, because it's becoming just kind of ridiculous to me how this is. And I'm quoting a lot of people here, but as you most eloquently said, the most good for the most people most of the time. No, you're not going to make them all happy, and you're not going to make them all sad. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents worth. But I think we need to come to a number. We need to get to a number that we can live with, that we like, and let's either do something with that, or let's just vote it off and get rid of it and let everybody go home, and we'll live like we live. And when they build subdivisions up the side of you and they're all like they are, then there they are. That's what you got.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to make a recommendation and put it out here so that we can discuss it, and like Mama says. And I would like to make a recommendation that we move our lot size to 2 acres and set a minimum road frontage on that, with that as well. The reason, I know I hear what everybody's talking about it's going to increase the cost. I know that it's going to increase the cost some. I understand that, but when you go from when you just add another acre of land to what you've already looking at a lot, I think that the benefits of that outweighs the cost. When we look at where our county is headed and all the things that's taking place in this county right now, we have watershed. We have watershed issues that's in the county. We already have a right smart of our county that's already under a 2 acre lot size stipulation. Next size down is 1.5 acres. So this would move it to a standard across, the county all the way around. Another point that I'd like to make out too is that several years ago, when the Lake Jordan rules were written, and were trying to be written, with the way that these things were being wrote, to meet the standards of the nutrients runoffs and the impervious surfaces, those rules were going to actually go into developments that already exist in developments and make them tear down houses and put in retention ponds, make them tear down houses and put in natural areas. So I think this is something that we should be looking at as a benefit to all citizens. Because we, as farmers out here, have had to take the load of reducing the nutrients levels that's been required to go into the Lake Jordan rules. Well, we're running out. We're running out of anything that we can do to help. And when you start taking the farmland away, that increases the load on that nutrients level that you have to meet. because it's no longer there. This 2 acre that I'm proposing, that I would like for us to talk about, would allow each one of these units to carry their own impervious surface. And it can be counted, toward keeping our waters clean and safe. So I understand, you're talking about economics and what's economic? What's economic? I mean, I cut off land for my daughter, 2.5 acres is, pretty much when you want to borrow money, they want that much, most of them. And they, also, they have loans that you can get with smaller lots and everything, but there's connections there to what you can do this. But, I'll just throw that number out. And if y'all want to discuss it as to which way we want to go or whatever, I think this is something that should have been done a long time ago. And, it's well past due time that something was done about it. So, that's my.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
Appreciate the conversation that's been had tonight and thinking about it over the past month or so, and looking at the proposal that the subcommittee was presented to us last month, and thinking through what benefits would be involved with increasing the lot size. I'm a visual person, so I like to see things kind of as a puzzle. And so if you take these pieces and you start to put them together, what does the picture show? And I can see some benefit to increase lot size from the perspective of privacy and providing some opportunity for more space between you and your neighbors. I can see increased lot size being beneficial for some increased outdoor activities, outdoor living activities, increased natural areas that kind of go along with the rural character that's been discussed and talked about inside the goals that the subcommittee built their foundation for this recommendation on. But as I mentioned last month, and this is the piece of the puzzle that to me is a big piece, and it's one that doesn't fit, and that's the affordability side of it. If you increase the lot size, then you increase the cost to the end consumer. And along with that, whatever complexities come with the development of that property, that increased lot size from a construction and infrastructure standpoint increases the cost, which runs down to the end consumer. And so I have a very difficult time putting that piece into the puzzle to be able to agree with the 2 acre lot size that's being proposed. For me, if I am having to look at this and offer a recommendation that would be, I could bring myself to support, I couldn't go above a 1 acre lot size minimum recommendation. That 1 acre is not much bigger than where I right now, around 13,000 square feet, something like that. But that still provides the opportunity to add some more privacy. It provides the opportunity, depending on the lay of the land, to keep some of the natural character that's there. But most importantly, it doesn't overly affect the affordability of the housing that's going there, which is something that as our county develops and grows, it's going to be necessary. It's necessary now. I mentioned examples last month about personal examples as to why I feel like that's necessary on a personal level, but it goes beyond that to an entire county of your kids, your grandkids who want to live here, but won't be able to afford to because of the supply and demand issue potentially of having houses that are affordable to move into. And that just continues to enhance and create the opportunity for more rental properties, more apartment complexes, things like that built so people have places to live. And it's just, to me, that affordability piece and having a house is really important. And I don't see that possible with the 2 acre lot size that's being proposed. And so I would not be able to support that.
Anybody else?
I want to kind of play devil advocate on that.
Sure.
I just got an email that I'm getting ready to sign a lease for my daughter's apartment, and it just blows my mind. $2,186 for a two-bedroom apartment. And that's not all in. That's just the base rent. But the reality is, if you take this lot size and drop it down to 20,000, do you think developers and builders are therefore lower the prices? The reality is with COVID, the price of building is up. And that's period. And we can debate why it's all up and whose profit margins are up and, you know, that we didn't have timber coming out of Canada and we couldn't get doors through Mexico and hardware got stuck, you know, prices won't go back down. I still pay a fuel surcharge every time I get a yard of concrete from a 2008 fuel surcharge. It's never gone away. So I would love affordable housing. I would love to not have to sign a lease for $2,200 a month. And I don't know how we address that, but this county has always been the one that's like, I don't know how you explain it, but it's time for Alamance County to say, hey, we have standards. And we need a certain standard, and we need to protect our lifestyle. We need to be able to support the things that we want here. Is 2 acres the answer? I'm not sure. I'm not saying that. Is 1 acre? I think our lot size needs to be larger because everything around us is larger. I do know that the way the ordinances are written now, that there are exceptions to get smaller lot sizes. And the comment has been made that that's not effective. Community wells aren't effective. Community septic systems aren't effective. It's been done. It's been done effectively in the county. I know it has. You know, what is the answer to quote unquote affordable housing? I didn't know until recently that the way the code is written, many homes are supposed to be hooked up to a septic system. So if you build a little mini house,
Tiny homes.
tiny homes. Yeah. So you can't, a smaller lot size for that. You think, hey, well, we can put 5 of them on one. No, you can't unless you do a community. So what is the right answer? How do we protect the whole citizenship of this county and protect the affordability and protect our business community? Because that's not to be discounted either. But the days of building a house for $2,500 is long since gone.
Yeah.
Long since gone. So what is the answer? And that's really a non-answer, I guess.
But that's that balance that you're looking for between the need and understanding that growth is here and it's coming and it's necessary, but also the rural character and the things that make this county special. And how do you determine that? How do you figure that? It's not an easy answer.
Yeah.
I am where I am on that, and like I said, and 2 acres to me, I think is a step too far beyond what is reasonable for that answer.
I'll jump in the fire. So I too was sadly a visual. So what I did, because I've gotten several phone calls, really not just this year, over the last few years, about this very issue and just what does maintaining the rural character of Alamance County means to you as a citizen of Alamance. And I've gotten different answers. What I also took the time to do is talk to some of the businesses that are moving to this area and asking them what things are important to them and where they want their folks to live at, to be able to get to work on time and not look for other jobs that are closer to eliminate the commute. And that answer was overwhelmingly, I want them to live here because if I need them, then they're close by and so forth. So obviously that means there's going to be an increase in a number of people, the more businesses that come. I think it's possible to be a pro homeowner and a pro business person at the same time when you look at it from the different lenses. And that's what I tried to do. And so what I did was I rode around Alamance to look at lot sizes that were 2 acres plus and some that were the bare minimum. And I love Mr. Chandler's pictures because I actually looked at these houses when I was riding around. There's another set of houses headed towards the landfill. If you take the shortcut that looked exactly the same. And so that gave me a good picture of what the current minimum lot sizes look like. And so I thought about it. Would that look good all across the beautiful county parts of Alamance County, in the north and the south, in the east and the west? Not much in the east, very much, but in the west. And I came to the realization that I think, considering a few factors, one, has to make business sense. I mean, I do hear from the developers and those that actually develop in Alamance County and live in Alamance County versus those that come from, Durham and develop here and just take off because they don't have to deal with it. But those that really like developing in Alamance County that live here, like the Builders Association that came, I forgot his name, from IROC is the name of the outside, but met with him a few weeks ago. Like him that builds custom houses, in my opinion, Nathan, that's his name. Those developers, in my opinion, their opinion matter more to me. Not to discount the others, but their opinions do matter more to me because they're not just building and running, but also talking to some of the homeowners that want to live in the county. Let's be transparent. I mean, nothing against Mebane, but I know a lot of folks that live in Mebane that want to move from Mebane because the rural character is no longer available in Mebane. And they've been in Alamance County most of their life. So their income is not the highest in the world, and the median income housing, everybody knows, is in the 60,000 or so per household. If we go to 2-acre lots, someone that is barely making the minimum household income, it'd be real tough for them to move to the county. And I don't think we should send a message that we don't want those that don't make a lot of money to live in the county. So they got to find that balance. Now, granted, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. I get it. But I think we have an opportunity to not go too far. When we already know what the cost of 1 acre costs now, and I think it was shared with us what the cost of 2 acres costs in the county now, and so forth. And those numbers are double compared to what they used to be. We got land in the northern part of the county, and the same thing. I remember the tax value being a lot less than it is now, which means that if I wanted to sell it, I could sell it for more. But I said all that to say that I too am not in favor of 2. I think that's too far for right now. I think there's a happy median that will do the most, will still achieve the objective, but would be a median compromise. And it's around the 1 acre or so mark. I think 0.68 acres or whatever that number works out to be, which looks like the houses there, is a little bit too small. But when it was first established, it worked. But doing nothing, I think, will not address a lot of feedback that we're receiving from those that live in the county. But I don't think we should go too far. I think we take it at the baby step of 1 acre, evaluate it over the next few years. And then if there needs to be a change, then we make that change. If that's the right point and it does slow things down a little bit, I think we're good. So I think that's where I land in my position at this point, that when I consider both sides of the coin, those that want to live in the county now more than they used to when they first moved to Alamance County, and making sure that they can still move there without having to pay $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 for a 2-acre lot plus the house to sit on it. And then think about it, you're going to sell a house that's sitting on 2 acres, it's going to cost you just as much. So I want to make sure that everybody who wants to live in the county can, if they, if they're able to financially, especially looking at the median household income, unless that increases dramatically, I don't see where that'll be possible. But also keeping the businesses in mind, those developers, that it has to make business sense as well. There's no need of buying a 100-acre tract of land and you can't put a few houses on it, because we're not trying to break even, no businesses. And I don't think we should force that on our developers, especially those that live here in Alamance either. So that's where I'm at on it. I guess, and to add to it, I would like to look at the other recommendations one at a time as well, because I think there's still some more discussion that's needed in 2, 3, and 4.
Whether to to just raise the minimum lot size, a quarter of an acre, is not going to address any of the issues and problems that you just said. It's basically not gonna change anything, just a quarter of an acre. If you want to keep the rural integrity of this county, you're gonna have to make a change that's going to make an effect. And and I understand what you're saying about the affordability, but we're looking at a lot. And that lot, $75,000 has been mentioned. If you added another acre to that lot size, it's still a lot. Yeah, you may have to add another $8,000, at which the average price of a bare acre is in the county. You know, the tax values and what we set on values. I understand you would have to add some to it, but to say that adding the acre to a lot is going to keep people from having affordable housing is ridiculous. It's just not going, I mean, it's not going to affect the home. What's affecting the home buyers is when you take a $75,000 lot and you put a $300,000 house on it to build it. That's what makes it unaffordable. That's my opinion, but I think that, you know, if we don't have county zone, if we had zone, we could regulate some of these things. And if you wanted to have all these things, you know, like affordable, they need to be done within that corridor of 85 where they can attach to the city's waters and sewers and accommodate these houses right next to the door so you see everybody inside.
Well, and I kind of want to say, I'm glad you mentioned that, because as Ms. Perkins was talking about the unanswered question of how do you address affordability, how do you kind of do a compromise and come to something meaningful? Perhaps zoning is the answer, and especially if it's coupled with an extension of water and sewer in the existing high development areas around the towns and cities, ETJs and things of that nature. To me, from just kind of maybe a philosophical, maybe a future long-term planning type perspective, to me, that makes the absolute most sense. There's certainly options and workable options here, but what you guys are talking about there, ultimately, to me, makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Now, I don't get a vote. I do whatever you guys tell me. But if you want my input on that angle, that's that.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, we need to revisit that. These are Band-Aids at the end of the day, but even, I guess, just to, respond, increasing from the current minimum lot to the 1 acre is gonna cost folks more. I mean, because you gotta think about, I guess I would say, ask a person who actually has to develop that lot, because there's a lot of hidden costs that I was not aware of until I came on the planning board. They go into developing that 1 acre lot that's drawn out boxes all over the place, to include, you know, the infrastructure that has to be in place for that, whether it's $100,000 house, if you can find one of them on there. So I guess that was my thought, when whatever we change it to, if we go up, it's gonna cost a little bit more because somebody has to eat that cost. But my thoughts is, do we need to make it go so high that we kind of block out a big chunk of Alamance County from that, if we do
I
go
just don't
to?
think that it would, that would have that big an impact on the price of that home. That's, you know, I understand it's going to go up some. But, you know, you can go over to Waterford over here and it costs you $250,000 for a lot. That's ain't bigger than this, there's no book here. So it's about affordability and who can afford and where you can afford, you know, and I'll get off the box.
So, okay, so I'm gonna do a little bit of clarification here. And I'm gonna back up to last month's meeting and work from there up to right now. Last month, I said that the county has got 3 revenue streams in this residential property tax, commercial property tax, industrial, and agricultural. And after the meeting, it was brought to my attention that we also get monies from sales tax, sales and use tax, and we get monies from grants. So I'm gonna clarify what I was talking about when I made that statement, and that was money that you can depend on pretty much. And that is, most folks that's got a house or a business or a farm are gonna pay their property tax. Now, clearly, some people don't. And this is the time of year when you can find out who they are, because it's in the newspaper. And if you want to, you can pay the tax, you get the property, and then you can go to paying the tax or not, and then the county will take it and sell it again. But the sales tax, and you can go back over the last 5 years, 10 years, however long, and see what the county has collected in sales tax and have a pretty good idea what the budget's gonna be. But if the economy tanks and people stop spending their money for whatever reason, then sales tax is gonna stop. So to remediate the mold in the school with sales tax from next year, probably not the greatest idea, because we don't know what the sales tax is gonna be come next year. Grant money would come in that same logic, as long as the grants are available and you can get that money, well, that's great, but if they run out, if they're no longer available, then that money doesn't need to be depended on. It's kind of like, historically, you don't gamble with your mortgage money. You gamble with your play money. If you lose it, no big deal. If you can't make your house payment, it could potentially be a big deal. So there's a clarification from last month. Now, tonight, this overlaps the last month. The number of $60,000 was used for an acre lot. That was in the last month's meeting. Now, is it true? If that's what it brings it to sale, that's true. If it's still for sale, there may be a reason for that. Tonight, the number was 72,000 for 2.1 acres. Isn't that correct? So it seems to me like 2 acres of land or 2.1 acres of land, $72,000, $36,000 an acre. 1 acre at 60,000 is 60,000. So yeah, it costs more, but land, pretty much like everything else is, the more you buy, the cheaper it is. So, and I just say that for clarification on that, just so that everybody's on it. I think everybody knows where I stand on this, so I don't need to weigh in. Smokey, anything you want to say?
I'm not supposed to, I don't support 2 acre lots.
Okay. 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 So has everybody had a chance to say what they wanted to say?
I'll just to pick up on your comments too. Any of the other two, I mean, I think there's still a lot on the table, especially regarding recommendations 2 and 3. If y'all have any questions about those or want to dig into the cluster option, the planning board review recommendation option. Because they would all kind of interplay together, right? I mean, if you say we're gonna have a 2 acre minimum, that would essentially completely do away with clusters. If you're gonna allow the cluster option, we gotta figure out maybe a nuanced way to allow those things to exist in harmony. Now, we don't need the answers tonight necessarily, but at least to acknowledge it. And if our job is gonna be to go in and work through these regulations and then present them at the next meeting, these are just the type of things that we need to be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Don't we already have a provision to allow for cluster subdivisions?
We do. It's not very clear, so there's no setting aside of open space, for example. There's just not, it basically says, yes, you can do cluster subdivisions. It doesn't really define what a cluster subdivision is or talk about ratios or that type of thing.
I guess, is that a bad thing? Like, meaning like,
it makes
if
it,
the developer wants to develop a tract of land and then in their plans, they say, hey, you know what? I think we want some green space over here, you know, they can do a cluster subdivision option if it works for them, or if they say, no, we're just gonna do all houses and build a park. I mean, I guess I'm wondering, do we need to define the ratio, not necessarily what a cluster subdivision is, but the ratio and the setting aside of how much open space for denser lots.
Yeah, at some point you would.
You would.
Certainly, you would need to define open space, and I think, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as good or bad, I just think that I would categorize it as providing clarity and guidance, so. In the presentation that I made, I used the hypothetical 20-acre lot, okay, so let's say someone purchases this 20-acre lot, and we're just gonna do rough math here, so and take this for what it is, so you've got a 20-acre lot, and they look at it and they go, okay, I've got a 2-acre minimum, so we're talking 10 lots. Obviously, you gotta build a road, so we're not talking 10 lots. Again, just simple math here. Or if there's the option for the cluster subdivision, they say, okay, I'm gonna do 10 lots, but then I've still got 50% of the remainder or some other percentage of the remainder. Maybe I could even do 12 or 15 lots clustered here, and then we still have the remainder. And the goal of the planning board, and by extension, the goal of the county is accomplished by preserving open space and maybe situating that open space towards the more publicly visible area of the neighborhood, so that the average citizen riding by sees rural development, but you actually have more lots, you actually have more housing there. That's just the type of clarity and guidance that I'm talking about, if the two regulations, if the two standards are going to interplay with each other. Does that make sense?
It does.
So one of the things that confused me with last meeting, and I tried to do some research. When was it Mr. Mize, was that his name? Was it,
From the RV park?
no, not the RV park, from the, yes, well, it's a Mize from the park.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Okay, so we were talking about the cone from the wells, and he made mention that cluster developments with community wells have caused more issues. I, in my head, can't get around 50,000 gallons a day is 50,000 gallons a day, whether it comes from 10 wells and 10 lots, or if it comes from 50,000 in one well, when, you know, how that works. Is there any research or studies, not just his personal opinion, which he's much more educated about it than I am, but any health departments, any universities or anything that has done any, that would give us guidance? Because one of the things that we've talked about is the development, the effect on the water supply, the watershed, which is a different, you know. Is it possible to find anything like that?
I would assume so. I can't imagine that he would not speak from the perspective of data to back it up. So I was actually a little surprised to hear that statistic as well. I would think it would be the reverse.
And Google has not been my friend in the search, so, and I know I'm not asking the correct way, but, and the second thing, along with the comments, one of these meetings, several meetings ago, we heard from the Alamance County Health Department on the current size of lots and subdivision that was getting approved. And from my memory, there are not many that are now currently getting approved at 30,000 or less than an acre already. From my memory. And I unfortunately don't have those notes with me. But
Yeah.
that's another piece of information that might be helpful.
Yeah, well, I think generally you're correct.
Are they larger? Is that what we're saying?
They're slightly larger. Ian probably has a better fingertip grasp of the data than I do, but I know you've been putting together some data since last fall about the number of lots created and the average size.
Yeah, I don't have anything compiled as far as totals are concerned. But I can kind of give a breakdown kind of month to month. And again, this isn't updated as of like today. So last updated like sometime in the middle of last month. But it does cover from like last September till this month. I guess you want like just like kind of a breakdown some of the numbers.
So her question was about basically the likelihood of most lots coming in at around 3,000 square feet or 30,000 square feet.
Sure. Generally speaking, they are towards that acre to 2 acre range. We did have a lot come in December for, I believe, one of our phases of our large subdivision that were off of community services that kind of skew those numbers somewhat towards the smaller lot sizes. But generally speaking, looking back, starting from middle of September last year, there are not, let me actually see, there are actually none that are, let me see, there are 11 here. There are 12 total that are between 30,000 square feet and 1 acre.
12 total. Out of,
Out of, let me see, let me kind of do some quick, math here. So let's see. I have about 130, and a lot of, some of those clusters are, I want to say, about 37 of those, 130 were gonna be those smaller lots out of the,
Just
south of Mebane,
never on water and sewer.
yeah. So, yeah, 12 out of 130, were between 30,000 and 1 acre.
a little less than 10%.
A comment to what you were saying about the water in the studies. There were studies done several years ago, on this very issue about what you were talking about. And what they came up with, problem they have is they can't really chase or determine where the water aquifers are and how long an applicant is going to last. And that's one of the things when the state was wanting to require, they wanted to put a limit on wells, that your own personal wells, how much you can come out, because the concern of drying up the aquifers. Well, when the studies came out and they tried to do this, there was no scientific data that would back this up, saying that those aquifers would dry. So that's all I know that we've dealt with, through farming and farm bureau and stuff, that the issue has been brought up several times in the past, and it's just not a real way of chasing and telling exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the only way that I can envision is the failure of the well, and you had to have a replacement or digging a well, because of,
And if the
Right.
water tables, water service don't get to the water table below, then that's where you lose your water supply.
because we speak about affordability, but if you're not careful, then you have a smaller lot and then it's not sustainable if they have a failure of the septic or the well. But we've heard that that's not something that's necessarily commonplace.
Yeah, I think that was one of the questions I remember asking, because we heard that all the time,
Yeah.
put 100 holes in the ground, that's gonna disturb him. And granted, we didn't have anything in writing to support it, but the statement was, well, I've been doing this for X amount of years, we haven't had that issue. The only issue we've had was when there's a big hole in the ground supporting the community well. But outside of that, 100 holes or 50 holes hasn't really affected.
But you only hear about ones that go bad, right?
Yeah.
That's it. And,
We'll hear about that one airplane.
that's right.
Yeah.
You gotta get it right 100% of the time. But to your point, you actually brought up something that reminded me when we first started this conversation. We got those statistics back then about, well, what is the average lot size being built anyway? And it was more than what we were looking at. And so that's why we had the question like, oh, well, why are we even looking at changing it? If it, I know this is a bad word, but why are we looking at changing it? That's already the case that's happening anyway. And I think that's where I was kind of torn, because we all kind of wanted to slow it down, make it bigger. But even changing it to 1 acre or 2 acres, if they're already coming in at that anyway, then are we doing anything except changing it on paper?
That puts it back to what I was saying.
I would-
If you go to a 2 acre standard across this county, everything's the same. And then you don't have certain developments and stuff coming in that want to push this limit of the 30,000 square feet. And that's where, and also it's been mentioned several times about land that won't perk, and they go to state and get it perked. And yeah, it's working right now, but for about 10 years from now, when they put this septic tank in on bad ground to start with, and then that homeowner sitting there with his house in no order to do anything with.
I would say, Anthony, that, of the developers I know, very rarely do I hear from a developer, I want to get as few lots out of this parcel as I can. Usually the goal is to get as many lots. And when you're talking about lots and acreage, it's kind of because a lot has a value. An acre is your raw land cost. So you can't just say a 2-acre lot is gonna cost twice as much as the one, and I think Rodney has pointed to that. It's a buildable lot, and what is a buildable lot? So what we're seeing through the health department is what our land and county supports now, but are we, it used to be in Alamance County, you didn't have big box builders. It was all custom. You didn't have, back then, the MI homes, the key homes and all them, you didn't have. And now we have developers who are putting together packages to sell things to D.R. Hortons. And unfortunately, that's the affordable housing. Wade Journey used to build houses at $130 square foot. And it just would blow your mind how they could do it, but it's a hard scale to balance.
Well, it sounds to me like if you go to an acre, you're basically gonna get in line with what is already being done anyway. You're not you're just changing the minimum. You're giving about another 12 or 14,000 square foot of repair area that you don't have in a 30,000 square foot lot. If Ian's numbers are correct, and I believe they are, then the lot sizes are already, the minimum is roughly an acre, so I could live with that. I could live with 65. But I think two is a little, I think at this point, I think I'm in agreement with that 2 acres may be a little much. Just from, as much as I'd like to see that, I don't know that we can do that and be reasonable about it to the average citizen.
And just one thing I'll mention to Mr. Pierce, based on your question is, part of this too is it's simply a policy choice. If the county ends up going in a larger lot size direction, there are places in this country where they say, you know what, we want to be the best damn airplane parts manufacturing community in the state of Kentucky or whatever. And if you're at the coast, we want to be the go-to place where people come and go out on a shrimp boat or whatever. It's a policy choice as well, intertwined with planning and zoning regulation, economic development. It's this board's part of your duty, part of your what's under your umbrella is make certain recommendations to the commissioners, whether or not they get adopted, right? But part of it is just simply a policy choice.
I think along with whatever we do, I still think you need to allow for cluster development if that's what you want to do, or conservation development, whatever you want to call it. It allows for more homes in a smaller place, but it gives you, honestly, in terms of rural character, it allows for more open space to be preserved, as opposed to that if you took a look at it that way, that gives you more preserved open space.
I guess it then just comes down to, I think what Anthony mentioned, the ratio, what does that look like, for the lots inside that cluster development? Some meat to the bones of the word, I guess.
Right.
So will we have to define that if we did the recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, do you absolutely have to? No, I don't think so. But I mean, you essentially do. Otherwise, what your cluster development could just be all residential lots and there's no specific preservation of open space, right? Because if it's all clustered together with public water and sewer, you don't have to reserve any open space. So if you're going to require a reservation of open space, then I think you need to have a specific number on what that is.
Could that also operate on a community well and community septic?
I think absolutely, yeah. You know, if your community septic field basically is your reserved open space,
Right.
you've killed two birds with one stone, so to speak.
Right.
Would it be both? I mean, currently now it's an either or. Is the way it's written, right? You can have a community septic, individual well will allow you to have, or you can have a community well with individuals.
Yep, you can, you know, you can have a blend. You can have public water and sewer, public water, private septic, private well,
Yeah,
public sewer, private well and septic. You can have
I'm gonna put the county ready to get the water business yet,
you
right?
have a blend of all those.
That would answer the whole question.
BYOW.
What about one?
BYOW.
Oh, I see.
But I guess currently the way number 2 reads, it doesn't restrict, cluster subdivision. That was the intention. Is that how the recommendation came about? And I agree, I wouldn't want to restrict a developer from wanting to do a cluster subdivision if they thought it made sense.
Yeah.
But I guess it would be defining what that looks like, you know, as long as it's there and it has open space, then I guess there's more review that would have to take place if that plan or their design makes sense. But so I guess that's where I understand number 2. So I would be.
I think that's where you get into the thing about allowing the planning board to review
Also, the next one.
a particular
Review.
site or plan for a development.
Well, do we have a more of a consensus on items number 3 and 4 on this list? The 50-foot buffer from farms, parks, historic districts, churches.
And that was a change from 25.
There is no,
There is no buffer currently. Oh, not in the county, that's right.
there is no one.
But the Heido has a buffer from heavy.
Yeah. That's right.
Industry, from these particular things, schools, churches, et cetera. But it wasn't anything for neighborhoods, I guess is what we're looking at.
Explain to me visually, if I can make a picture, what this buffer would look like. So, in a just a generic piece of property that bumps up to a park, and that 50-foot buffer, what does that look like spacing wise?
Yeah, so
Where
you
it
just
starts?
imagine that, if you're standing at the road and you're looking at all of the homes and lots that have been recently subdivided, built, whatever, and maybe the lot behind it is a county park, then there would just be an undisturbed buffer in the backyards of those homes neighboring the county park property, the farm
Of
property.
the 50-foot.
Yeah.
From the property line in.
Who would own the buffer?
The-
Would it be in the lots of the people
Yeah,
up
it would-
against
it would
that
be part
property?
of the lots.
Okay, so it'd be an additional 50-foot, whatever that math adds up to the lot itself, that would come from the property line in or.
Correct.
Okay.
So they wouldn't be able to develop.
Undisturbed or undeveloped.
Well, that would be part of what we need to define, right? Is it an undisturbed buffer? Is it simply vegetative? Where, you know, you have something as simple as grass? Is it, we're going
Parking
to,
lot,
we're gonna say you have to plant new trees, you know?
and then you get into what kind of trees,
That's where we get into the policy aspect of it.
which is a little
Yeah, I would.
size of the trees, type of the trees, height. of the-
Well, that's similar to what you got in your solar farm ordinance, but
It's a little different.
we may be asking a lot there.
Yeah.
Consensus wise, I was just thinking 50-foot seemed like a big area. Cause I walked off 25 at a property. And I thought that was a lot of, space from the road, I think is how that one was.
Well, this
room
room's
or
about
do you
50,
think?
this room's about 50 feet that way, give or take, probably.
About 56.
Maybe 50
probably is way problem.
30.
Oh, yeah.
Got 30-foot across right here.
Well, I was gonna say from this wall to that door jammed down on the other side of the park stand.
So here to the water fountain. Okay, and it had to be on both sides if it's 2 houses, so it ended up being 100 feet in theory.
And what do, you know, what do you think of the 50-foot buffer? was that you couldn't build houses, you know, within 50 foot of that, within that buffer of a farm, of a.
Oh,
church.
okay, I got you.
It's the actual, it's actually like you're building a house.
Well, that would be
Would you
more
go
like,
to the-
that would be more like land spacing or setbacks,
Right.
not a buffer.
Correct, that's what I was
Maybe-
thinking.
Your terminology's wrong
Yeah,
there.
yeah, I mean, that's what I think that was the whole intent was to keep from a house going and setting off the property line like it is now 10 foot, and you can build right within 10 foot of the property line.
No,
And
that's,
then
yeah.
you got my chicken house
That's
sitting
not
over here, and they don't like it, I'm 50 foot off the line, I have to be 50. I'm 50 foot, 100 foot off the line, but they come over here and build right next to me and say, oh, you got this. You gonna have to cut them lights off, we can't stand that. You know, but I think that was the intent, if we got, as farmers and churches, we gotta allow that 50 foot on our side. Then they should be able to, if you're gonna have a development, they should have to, on the same thing, and have 50 foot on their side.
Mhm. Yeah, but I agree, I think that's a setback. in my
Yeah, it's not-
opinion, 'cause
Yeah,
they say
but it-
buffer than that.
yeah, the
Different.
term or the wording might be not quite exactly.
So in a setback, if you notice these pictures, in a setback, you're allowed to have a driveway and stuff. You're allowed to have things in your
Same
setback.
setback.
The buffer is supposed, and normally there's a definition of what a buffer is and what kind of plants go in. It's vegetative, it's not disturbed. It's to be maintained. You can't put the parking lot in it, generally speaking. So that would be the difference between a setback.
Setback, you could put a park.
You put your parking lot, put your
Okay.
driveway, you can put your kids' playground in it. You can,
Okay.
yeah.
You just couldn't build inside.
You can put your well in
Couldn't put
it,
a
yeah.
permanent structure.
Yeah.
Just got to alert for a tornado warning until 11 o'clock. I'm sorry, tornado watch.
Watch.
Yeah.
Wasn't different.
You can't have your well.
Then say this painter go off and get a 20.
Okay, so tornado watch, it's 11. Y'all wanna go ahead and head to the house, just in case?
Oh, yeah.
I'd rather not watch it.
I guess, are we close to finishing up whatever we were planning to do?
Here's my proposal on it. You and y'all go ahead and start working on some consistency statement words. Let's leave buffer in it for the time being with the option of changing that. I think I'm personally in agreement with the cluster. As long as there's corresponding undeveloped open space, I've got no problem with that. And that does in fact hold down on development costs because there's less roads to build. Is that a correct statement?
Hypothetically, I mean, I think every situation's unique, but hypothetically, less fewer roads are infrastructure.
Depending where you establish the buffer. Yes, because if the buffer's at the front, of course, that increases the length of the road you get where you're talking about. Yes, that could possibly.
But if the developer has the ability to choose where the buffer is, then that gives more flexibility within their property.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So they could choose to put that open area.
Wherever.
If they have, if the wording allows them the choice.
Right,
Yeah.
there needs to be flexibility from, in my opinion, because you may have a piece of land that has areas that don't perk or that have rock. And,
Because just really, the soil conditions determine the lot size now anyway, which is why you're seeing some of this stuff, and when you get into the county, that sort of dictates that. And then, I have a son at home, I have to go to that. Thank y'all for letting me talk, and the home builders, we have, where we invite people, and even yourself, Matthew, like Sam Hoggood and them, where they can come speak with us and meet with the builders, just get our impact, and we encourage, if we can, if you got an email, or whatever, I'll have, our executive officer, especially we'd like to meet with you as well, but the board members too, where we talk, and then you can pick our brains, we can listen to you and sort of get some feedback about some of the questions, because I understand why Mr. Mize said what he said about the well, stuff like that. And that's stuff that we definitely hope y'all to come every day. And we can do it breakfast, lunch, or in the afternoon, so. But I've got a son at home, so I need to get home, but thank y'all. And hopefully y'all will take us up on that and be with us, you know.
Thank you.
You said on the cards on the budget.
Yeah, yeah. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman. We're trying to come to some kind, and I just want to throw something in here that just lets everybody have a chance to think on this and kind of sleep on. Could we come to us, could we come to an agreement, could we have a compromise between the acre and the 2 acre and go to an acre and a half? Go in, but can you think about that? Could you live with that?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, you were asking that we get a draft, that we can make some adoptions of the
Adjustments,
wording and number.
Yeah, we're gonna do draft in pencil so we can change stuff, but yeah,
Just, you know, work on.
Yeah.
okay. You clear on your part?
So for the most part, I believe I am, yes. So our directive is to put together a draft of a suite of changes to the subdivision ordinance that would incorporate all 4 of these recommendations.
Yep.
And the one particular aspect of it I heard was with regards to cluster subdivision options to allow for a choice of the specific location of the open space. So it doesn't have to be towards the main road back of the property, for example, allow flexibility. Any thoughts on a percentage of open space? 5, 10, 25? I'm gonna leave that to
Yeah, I
us.
I need to think on that probably a little bit myself.
It needs to be commensurate with what the lot size would have been to start with.
Randolph's is 50%.
50%?
Oh, this is the paper we have here.
Yeah, that's a document that Ian had put together as part of the subcommittee's conversations.
Franklin County's 25, Cumberland County's 15. But 50% of the 15 must be fit for recreational use. 15% in Pitt County. Vance County's 20%. Jackson County has a swinging scale that goes more like the scale you had on lot sizes. I'm not even going to try to dissect that.
So just so I understand, and I'm a little confused. Let's say we have 20 acres, and if you went to 2 acres for math, you could get 10 lots, and I understand you got right now. So with a cluster development, you would set aside 50%?
Well, that's just one county's thing. That's not everywhere.
Which would leave 10 acres to develop, and then they would allow you to have.
Well,
10 lots?
they have some other things. For Guilford's thing, Guilford's deal is their minimum site size is 25 acres.
Okay.
Then they have a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. And then they also say, but they have zonings, they have some other provisions in here. Rural preservation districts are different from other districts. So they've got some other rules that they have to abide by. But in general, in our application, their minimum lot size on that is 5,000 and the minimum site size is 25 acres. Now, I don't know if we want to get that deep, but.
And they got water and sewer too.
No, that's what.
No, this is just
On a
in, the
5,000-foot lot.
Yes, but.
This
it's
is
a
in the-
community well.
this is-
and then off-site septic.
right, this is in the
Okay.
county.
Okay.
This is
That's
just
that's what I
county.
was trying. Typically in a cluster development, you can, so in your scenario, the 20 acres, you can do 10 lots. That's it. You can do 10 lots and they can be 1.5 acre lots. Then that's where your ratio comes in. You know, if you dedicate 25%, which is, in this case, is 2.5 acres. Is that right? That's a good number.
Yeah.
Whatever that number is, and then the rest could be lots. But
Right.
very seldom do I see you allowing more than what you could normally get on a tract of land.
Right.
I haven't
Wait.
seen that.
Which is where I was when he said whatever the lots would have been.
Correct.
If
Correct.
it's 2
Well,
acres.
Matt said earlier, you know, in that scenario, if you went down, you could go to 12 or 15 lots. I haven't seen that. You know, it's been 10 lots. If you can get 10 lots on it, we'll let you do a cluster development with 10 lots and dedicate the open space and then have your off-site septic areas and other stuff. And I may be wrong, but that's typically what I've seen.
It looks to me like the balance is somewhere between 50 and 25. You could pick an average in there and say 30, 35, something like that, and be reasonable. If you wanted to, I'd say 35% is a fair.
Well, let's start with that for the draft.
Yeah, let's plug 35%.
We can bring this back up again in September, right? We won't get that far.
Or June of 25.
You can bring it up whenever you want.
Yeah.
And so we'll, I guess it's pencil, so we still have decide on number one, sounds like either way.
But I think we've had good discussion.
We've had a great discussion.
We can take another look too at, what neighboring counties do, what similar counties do, you know. Things of that nature.
So for that, that you drafted now, are we going with 1 acre, 1 acre and a half, or 2 acres?
We never really
I
decide.
don't think they actually said. Where you sit the size.
We wonder.
We'll put 2 acres in there because that's what we got, with the understanding that we may dial it back to acre and a half,
Boy,
Or an acre.
Or an acre.
or just make no changes.
or none.
Let's go with you got the acre and a half, right? And
Yeah, I had an acre and a half a year ago.
If you can get his paper, if he's still got it, if you have close to it.
So
It's probably in here somewhere.
with the, subdivision ordinance being in Article 6, Section 9, what we have next on the list in terms of our standard review is 6.1 and 6.2. There really is no Article 5 because it was reserved for hypothetical snow camp zoning. So it's
You gonna
a
renumber it?
blank sheet of paper.
we don't want to.
So, I guess that would be my question too, is this going to jump the line and we're gonna take a look at 6.9 first? Or should we continue on with 6.1 and 6.2 and 6.9? Now getting additional priority, you know? Part of it is a little bit of a workload question too, and like I mentioned earlier, we are short staffed.
Personally, don't think you want to do 6.9, we need the rest of, whether you move it to the beginning of 6 or leave it in 9.
Yeah.
I don't think you want to, because it sounds like it's gonna be some discussion, just on 6.9.
It's gonna be quite a bit, I think.
It would be just one by itself, whether we do this beginning the 6 or in order.
Yeah, and we're not on any firm timeline with these UDO reviews, right? It's just cleaning up the ordinance, clarification, legal language, stuff like that.
I'm fine with it as long as, 6.1 through 8 doesn't have some crossover language or impact to 6.9. If there is, then I think we will look at that together, but
Yeah.
if not, then we can do it understandable.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point, and there certainly is, especially when it comes to like flood zone and watershed regulations, because those are gonna be applicable to subdivision lots as well. We might have to kind of take a look to make sure that we've got uniformity there, but I think that's excellent.
What say you, Mr. Chair?
I'll make a motion with adjourn, got Tony to watch.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Uh,
Okay.
I'm ready to stay. Yeah, stay here, keep on.
This bill in order to be a safe one.
Phone bus gotta go out. Phone go off. Going in there.
You.
No, it's Bob Hill, rescue, so.